Jason Miller had always been a dedicated employee at Grove Technologies. At 28, he had already spent 5 years with the company, working his way up from a junior developer to a senior position. His journey had been anything but easy. It wasn't just about coding, it was about commitment. Jason had sacrificed countless evenings and weekends to perfect his skills, stay ahead of the latest technologies, and consistently meet tight deadlines. And he did it all with one goal in mind: promotion. He dreamed of becoming a team leader, taking charge of projects, and ultimately securing a managerial role. Grove Technologies was a company that valued ambition, but it also had a highly competitive culture. The company's clients were demanding, the projects were large-scale, and the expectations were always sky-high. Success meant working long hours, exceeding expectations, and above all, proving you could handle the pressure. Jason understood that his colleagues often joked about the relentless work ethic required to survive there, but Jason was determined. He believed that hard work and dedication would pay off eventually. After all, wasn't that how things worked? In the years since he'd joined the company, Jason had built a solid reputation as someone who could always be counted on to get the job done. He wasn't the most outspoken in meetings, but when he spoke, people listened. His ideas were solid, his coding skills impeccable, and his work ethic unmatched. And while there were other talented developers in the company, none had put in as much time and effort as he had. At least, that's what Jason believed. But despite all his contributions, the promotion he had been longing for had always been just out of reach. That changed when Rachel Sanders, the senior manager, began to take a more active interest in his work. Rachel had always been a bit of an enigma. She was smart, strategic, and known for being a tough but fair manager. When Jason first joined, he'd seen her more as an unattainable figure, someone who seemed to have a laser focus on performance, always moving the team toward new challenges, without hesitation. Over the years, however, she had become someone Jason respected deeply. But more than that, he had become eager to earn her approval. Rachel wasn't just any manager, she was the key to moving up within Grove Technologies. It started with small things. Rachel would compliment Jason's problem-solving skills in team meetings, often singling him out for his attention to detail. Jason noticed that she began to rely on him more often, asking for his input in high-level strategy meetings, and even consulting him when major clients presented difficult challenges. Her trust in him was becoming more apparent, and for the first time, Jason thought that his dream of moving into a leadership role might actually be within his grasp. He worked even harder, making sure every task was completed with precision. He knew he couldn't slip up. Not now, not when things were finally going his way. Then one day things started to change in subtle ways that Jason didn't initially understand. During one of their routine team check-ins, Rachel asked him to take the lead on a new project, something much bigger than any project he had worked on before. The stakes were high, and it was a challenging client. Jason was nervous, but he took the challenge head-on, dedicating all his focus to the project. His work on the project exceeded expectations, and Rachel praised him publicly, noting that he had demonstrated excellent leadership potential. The recognition didn't stop there. In the following weeks, Rachel continued to offer him opportunities that seemed designed to showcase his abilities, leading small teams, presenting in front of senior leadership, and taking ownership of key client communications. Jason was finally getting the exposure he had longed for, and it seemed like Rachel was intentionally positioning him for the next step. He could feel the promotion he had dreamed of finally coming within reach. Rachel's actions didn't go unnoticed by the rest of the team. Colleagues began to congratulate him for his increased visibility and responsibility. "Looks like you're next in line," one of his peers said. With a wink during a break in the office kitchen, Jason smiled, feeling a mix of pride and excitement. His hard work was finally being recognized, and it felt like he was on the verge of achieving everything he had ever wanted. He could already see himself in the new role, a manager calling the shots, overseeing projects, mentoring junior developers, and making a real impact on the company's future. He pictured leading meetings, strategizing with executives, and being the one to make decisions that would shape the direction of Grove Technologies. The sense of validation that had eluded him for years was almost within his grasp. But in the back of his mind, a small voice urged him to stay grounded. He had seen others work hard only to be passed over for promotions. He had seen talent overlooked, politics influencing decisions, and the occasional shock promotion go to someone with more social savvy than skill. Jason didn't want to get too ahead of himself, but this felt different. He had worked hard, demonstrated his leadership, and was finally being noticed for the right reasons. Rachel's trust in him was the biggest sign that he was on the right path. He just had to keep doing what he had always done, work hard, stay focused, and wait for the official word. At this point, Jason's excitement was palpable. He could feel the change in the air, and it was no longer just about putting in the hours. It was about finally reaping the rewards of his years of dedication. The promotion was within his reach, and for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that it was actually going to happen. The morning Jason received the news was one of those rare moments where everything seemed to slow down. He had been working late the night before, finalizing the last details of a major client proposal, and barely slept. But when Rachel called him into her office that morning, there was a lightness in his chest, something he hadn't felt in weeks. He had been expecting a meeting, but this felt different. For the first time, he wasn't walking into her office filled with questions and anxieties about his performance. Instead, he was walking in with a quiet confidence. This could be it. This could be the moment he had worked so hard for. As he entered Rachel's office, she looked up from her desk with a smile. It wasn't just the kind of smile she gave everyone. It was genuine. She gestured for him to sit down, and as he took his place across from her, he felt a rush of anticipation. "Jason, I've been keeping a close eye on your progress these past few months." She started, her tone steady yet warm. "You've exceeded every expectation we've had for you. I've been consistently impressed by your leadership on the Alpha Tech project, the initiative you've shown with the team, and your ability to juggle multiple high-priority tasks." Jason smiled to himself, hearing the words he had longed to hear. Rachel was always straight to the point, never one for excessive flattery. So when she spoke like this, it was clear that she meant it. But then before he could fully savor the praise, she continued, "I'm pleased to inform you that we're promoting you to team lead effective immediately." The words landed like a slow, deliberate wave of relief. Jason's heart surged in his chest, and a sense of disbelief spread across his body. A team lead, the position he had been working toward for years. His hands instinctively clenched, and for a moment, everything else in the room seemed to fade away. Rachel continued speaking, but Jason barely heard the words. He heard the congratulations, the reassurances about his new responsibilities, but it felt as if he was floating in a bubble of triumph. Team lead. After all the late nights, all the sacrifices, all the moments of self-doubt, this was it. He had done it. It was surreal. Jason had worked for this moment for so long, and now that it was here, the reality hadn't fully hit him. He had always been the dependable team member, the one who worked quietly behind the scenes, ensuring projects got done on time. But now he would be the one calling the shots. He would be the one setting deadlines, leading meetings, and mentoring the next generation of developers. His journey at Grove Technologies had shifted dramatically. He had spent years proving himself to everyone around him, but now he had to prove something to himself. Rachel's voice broke through his thoughts as she slid a stack of paperwork across the desk. "I've outlined your new responsibilities along with the team structure and the new projects you'll be overseeing. You'll also be working closely with Tina, the Director of Operations, to ensure a smooth transition. We have high expectations for you, Jason, but I have full confidence in your ability to step into this role." Jason nodded, though the words seemed distant for a moment. The shock of hearing the promotion was still sinking in. "Thank you, Rachel. I won't let you down," he said, his voice steady, despite the surge of excitement inside him. He took the paperwork from her hands and glanced over the new role's expectations. There was no time to lose. This was just the beginning. As he left her office, Jason couldn't stop smiling. His colleagues were already starting to congratulate him. As he walked back to his desk, their cheers and high fives, like a chorus welcoming him to this new chapter of his career. Jason was flooded with a mix of pride, relief, and a bubbling excitement for what lay ahead. He couldn't wait to get started, to show everyone that he was ready for this responsibility. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he truly belonged, that all his hard work had led him to this point. Team lead, this was his moment. That afternoon, Jason called his family, his mom and dad, to share the news. His mom's voice trembled with excitement when she heard, and his dad, who rarely showed much emotion, congratulated him with a tone that conveyed both pride and respect. It wasn't just about the promotion itself, it was about what it represented. Jason had reached the goal he had set years ago when he first walked into Grove Technologies as an intern, eager to prove himself. He had come so far, and now he was standing on the precipice of something new and bigger. As Jason reflected on his journey, He thought about the long hours he had spent learning new skills, solving problems, and proving his worth. He had endured tough projects and late nights, but every challenge had been an opportunity to grow, to get closer to this moment. The role of team lead wasn't just about a new title. It was a validation of all those years of hard work, of pushing through the obstacles, and of constantly striving for more. But as the excitement of the promotion began to settle, Jason found himself faced with a new challenge: how to adjust to this new level of responsibility. He had always been a part of the team, working alongside others, supporting them when they needed it. But now the dynamic would shift. He had been a trusted colleague, but now he would be the one others looked to for guidance. It was a daunting thought, but Jason was determined to rise to the occasion. As he sat at his desk, sorting through the paperwork for his new role, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was what he had always wanted. This was the moment when everything he had worked for had culminated. He was no longer just a senior developer. He was a leader now, and no matter the challenges ahead, he was ready to take them on. Jason had barely slept the night after receiving the promotion. His mind raced with thoughts of the new responsibilities ahead, what changes he would implement in his team, how he would prove himself as a leader, and how he could finally begin to shape his future at Grove Technologies. The excitement from the morning still bubbled in him as he returned to his desk, and he couldn't help but grin every time someone congratulated him. His colleagues were all eager to see him step into the role he had worked so hard for, and Jason was ready to deliver. It felt like a dream come true. But by noon, everything began to unravel. Jason's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. When he answered, it was Rachel's assistant. "Hey, Jason, Rachel would like to see you in her office now." The casual tone of the assistant's voice did nothing to ease the tight knot in Jason's stomach. He quickly stood walking toward Rachel's office, each step heavier than the last. Something felt off. The excitement from earlier in the day had turned into a growing sense of unease. He knocked on Rachel's door and stepped inside. Rachel was sitting at her desk, her expression unreadable. She motioned for him to sit, and as Jason took his seat, he could sense the shift in the air. This wasn't the same warm reception from earlier that morning. The smile that had been on Rachel's face when she had promoted him was now absent. There was a coolness to her demeanor, one that made Jason's heart race. "Jason, I want to start by saying that your work over the past few years has been exceptional." Rachel said, her voice steady but distant. "You've earned this promotion, and it's well-deserved." Jason nodded, trying to remain calm, though his stomach was now in knots. "Thank you, Rachel. I'm ready to get started." Rachel paused, and for a moment, Jason thought he saw a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. She leaned forward slightly, folding her hands together on the desk. However, after some discussions with senior management and a few recent developments within the company, we've had to make some adjustments to our staffing plan. Jason's brow furrowed, and a chill crept down his spine. "What do you mean?" Rachel exhaled slowly, the weight of the next words evident. "I regret to inform you that, effective immediately, we're retracting your promotion. While you were initially being considered for team lead, changes in our organizational structure and upcoming strategic shifts have forced us to put a hold on your promotion for the time being." Jason's mind went blank. The words didn't seem to make sense, and his chest tightened with disbelief. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Was this a joke? Had he misheard? Rachel's face remained impassive, and Jason struggled to hold his composure. "Wait," Jason finally found his voice. I don't understand. You told me just this morning that I was being promoted. I've already told my family, my team, this doesn't make sense." Rachel's eyes softened slightly, but she didn't back down. "I understand how disappointing this is, but this decision isn't about your performance. You've been doing great work, and this is not a reflection of your abilities. It's a company decision. One I had no control over." Jason's mind was racing, and his thoughts felt like they were spiraling. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The promotion that had felt so solid, so real, just hours ago, was suddenly yanked away without explanation. The sense of pride he'd felt from all the congratulations, the future he had pictured for himself, all vanished in an instant. "Can you at least tell me why?" Jason asked, his voice betraying the confusion and hurt he felt. "What changed between this morning and now? You were so sure about the promotion earlier." Rachel leaned back in her chair, running a hand through her hair. "There are restructuring decisions happening in higher levels of the company. They've decided to freeze some promotions and reallocate resources to different teams. It's nothing personal. Jason, I'm sorry. Nothing personal." Jason's frustration began to bubble to the surface. He had worked tirelessly for this. He had earned it, and now, in a single conversation, it was being taken away as if it meant nothing. It was as though all the late nights, the missed family events, the extra miles he had gone for, the company had been wiped away with a few corporate buzzwords. You're telling me that I've done everything you've asked, and now I'm not getting the promotion because of some strategic shift. Jason's voice cracked slightly, his anger and disappointment becoming harder to suppress. Rachel's expression didn't change, but there was a glimmer of sympathy in her eyes. I know this is hard to understand, Jason, and I wish things were different, but this is what the company has decided. I want to assure you that this doesn't diminish your value here. We still need you, and we're counting on you to keep performing at the level you have. The words felt hollow. We still need you. That phrase stung more than anything. How could she say that knowing what she had just done? We still need you, but apparently not enough to follow through with their promises. The promotion Jason had worked so hard for was nothing more than a fleeting illusion. He had been given a taste of something he'd dreamed of, only for it to be ripped away as if it had never existed. Rachel stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. I know this is difficult, Jason, but I'm confident that you'll continue to perform well in your current role, and when things settle down, there will be new opportunities. You've got a bright future here. I believe that. Jason stood the words swirling in his mind, but nothing came out. He wanted to say so many things about how unfair this was, how the company had let him down, how his hard work was being disregarded, but he bit his tongue. The last thing he wanted was to say something he'd regret, something that might end his career at Grove Technologies altogether. Without another word, Jason left the office, his head spinning. The office seemed quieter as he walked back to his desk, as if the walls themselves were closing in. His colleagues who had congratulated him just hours ago didn't know the truth. They didn't know the promotion had been taken back. Jason sat at his desk feeling a mix of betrayal and confusion. How could he face them now? It wasn't just the promotion that had been taken away. It was his sense of security, his belief in the system. And as he sat there trying to absorb what had just happened, one thought kept running through his mind. This was only the beginning of something bigger, something unexpected. Jason was determined not to let this setback define him. He would find a way to turn this mess into something he could control. But for now, all he could do was process the pain of the unexpected twist. The days following the retraction of his promotion were some of the hardest Jason had ever faced in his career. His world had been turned upside down, and the sense of betrayal he felt was suffocating. Each time he walked into the office, the weight of what had happened seemed to follow him like a dark cloud. It was as if the excitement, the pride he had felt only days ago had been replaced by doubt and confusion. The future he had envisioned, leading a team, taking on more responsibility, proving his worth, felt distant now, almost out of reach. But as the initial sting began to fade, something shifted within Jason. He knew that sitting in his frustration and disappointment wouldn't get him anywhere. Grove Technologies had made its decision, but that didn't mean his career was over. If anything, the challenge had awakened something deeper in him, a fire that refused to be extinguished. Jason had worked too hard for too long to let this setback define him. He was determined to turn this situation around, not for anyone else, but for himself. The first thing Jason did was take a step back and assess the situation with a clearer mind. He recognized that he needed to detach his emotions from the corporate game he was caught up in. His personal worth had been tied too closely to his role at Grove Technologies, and now, with that role slipping away, Jason realized how much more he had to offer beyond just the title. He was not the promotion, and the promotion was not him. Grove Technologies was a great company, but it wasn't the only place where he could make an impact. In the following weeks, Jason started to take control of his career in a way he never had before. He began by reaching out to mentors and colleagues. He respected those who had been in similar positions and had weathered their own setbacks. These conversations proved to be invaluable. One of his mentors, Olivia, who had been with the company for over a decade, shared advice that would shape Jason's next steps. The key to moving forward is to stay open to opportunities, even the ones that don't seem obvious at first. Sometimes you need to step outside your comfort zone to see where your true potential lies. Olivia's words resonated with him. He had been so focused on moving up the corporate ladder within Grove Technologies that he hadn't stopped to think about other avenues of growth. What if there were opportunities outside the company that would allow him to use his skills in new ways? What if the promotion, as much as he had wanted, it wasn't the best path for him after all? Jason spent the following weeks focusing on his personal and professional growth. He enrolled in a few leadership development courses, honed his skills in project management, and attended webinars on business strategy. He realized that his passion for technology was only one part of the equation. He also wanted to become a leader, someone who could inspire and build teams. He began learning more about the softer skills of leadership: communication, conflict resolution, and team dynamics. These were the skills he hadn't fully explored before, and now he saw them as essential to his long-term success. While Jason was diving deeper into his own development, he also took time to reflect on his role at Grove Technologies. He recognized that, despite the setback, he was still in a position of influence. He had a strong reputation within his team, and his expertise in development was invaluable. Instead of sulking in the corner of his office, he chose to engage more deeply with the team. He started taking on new challenges, volunteering to help with cross-department projects, and mentoring junior developers. He knew that the more he showed up, the more his value would be seen, not just in the work he did, but in the way he contributed to the overall success of the company. In meetings, Jason took the initiative to offer suggestions and insights, showing his willingness to help improve the projects his team was working on. He didn't want to come off as desperate to prove himself, but he understood that actions spoke louder than words. It wasn't enough to simply show up. He had to consistently prove that he was capable of more than his current role. He focused on building relationships with his peers and senior leaders, knowing that these connections could open doors in the future. He wanted to be remembered not just as a developer, but as someone who added strategic value to the organization. Despite his efforts, the shadow of the promotion continued to linger over him. Jason knew that he couldn't shake off the disappointment entirely, but he also knew that dwelling on the past wasn't going to move him forward. He decided to have an honest conversation with Rachel. He requested a meeting not to plead for the promotion, but to gain clarity on how he could better position himself for future opportunities. When the meeting happened, Rachel was professional and apologetic, but also clear in her explanation. She acknowledged the circumstances that had led to the retraction, but assured Jason that his performance had not gone unnoticed. She encouraged him to continue developing his leadership skills and promised that his work would be recognized. Jason left the meeting feeling more at peace. While the promotion still stung, he realized that he was in control of his next steps. He didn't need Grove Technologies to define his worth. He could define it himself. In the following months, Jason threw himself into his work and his personal development with renewed vigor. He kept expanding his professional network, reached out to former colleagues for advice, and even considered side projects that would allow him to take on leadership roles in different environments. He knew that getting back on track wasn't just about waiting for another promotion. It was about actively seeking the opportunities that matched his skills, goals, and aspirations. Jason also began to take more time for himself outside of work. He recognized that balance was key, and the grind of trying to prove himself had worn him down over the years. He took up new hobbies, spent more time with family, and even started traveling more things he had neglected while chasing that elusive promotion. He realized that in focusing solely on his career, he had missed out on living life fully. Now he was committed to creating a balance that would make him a better leader and a more well-rounded individual. Weeks had passed since the shock of losing the promotion, and Jason had found himself in a strange limbo, somewhere between frustration and resolve. Initially, the setback had shaken his confidence, leaving him with the nagging question of whether he was truly valued at Grove Technologies. But as the days unfolded, the sting of rejection began to fade, replaced by a quiet determination. It wasn't just about bouncing back anymore. It was about coming back stronger, more focused, and more in control of his own career trajectory. Jason had spent the last few months doing something he hadn't focused on in years. Introspection. He asked himself tough questions. What did he want out of his career, and why had he let a single setback define his sense of self-worth? The realization was clear. He had been chasing promotions and external validation as the ultimate measure of success. But in doing so, he had lost sight of the things that truly motivated him. Grove Technologies wasn't the only place where he could thrive. His skill set, his leadership abilities, and his potential were not limited to a title on his business card or a specific position within a company. The change in mindset didn't happen overnight. It took time, and it took the support of a few trusted people. Olivia, his mentor from earlier, played a key role. She helped him see that setbacks weren't failures. They were opportunities to grow, learn, and adapt. Through their conversations, Jason came to realize that the pain he felt from the retracted promotion was just part of the bigger picture. It was an obstacle, not a dead end. More importantly, it was a challenge he had the power to overcome. With a renewed sense of purpose, Jason made an important decision. He would no longer wait for opportunities to come to him. Instead of holding on to the resentment or disappointment about the promotion that was taken away, he decided to focus on taking control of his own future. This wasn't about proving himself to Rachel or to anyone at Grove Technologies anymore. It was about proving to himself that he could rise above the situation and create a future that was more in line with his own values and aspirations. Jason began to take more risks, pushing himself beyond the comfort zone he had been living in. Instead of accepting every challenge and project that was handed to him by his superiors, he began seeking out opportunities that aligned more closely with his personal vision of success. He volunteered to lead cross-departmental initiatives where he could directly influence strategy and collaborate with people outside of his usual team. This not only helped him expand his network, but also allowed him to step into the leadership roles he had been dreaming of. It wasn't the team lead position he had once hoped for, but it was a step in the right direction. As Jason continued to evolve, he realized that leadership wasn't just about a title. It was about taking initiative, inspiring others, and making an impact. He started mentoring junior developers, offering guidance on how to approach problem solving and how to navigate the often overwhelming challenges of the tech world. In doing so, he saw himself grow not only as a technical expert, but also as a leader who genuinely cared about the growth and success of others. At work, Jason's reputation began to shift. No longer just a skilled developer, he was becoming known as someone who could be relied upon to lead, motivate, and elevate his colleagues. The feedback he received from his peers and his team was overwhelmingly positive. He had become the person who could not only solve the most challenging problems, but also guide others through their own professional struggles. This shift didn't go unnoticed. Senior management took notice of his growing influence and the results he was driving. But what made this transformation even more powerful was that Jason's rise wasn't reliant on external validation. He no longer measured his worth by the title that someone else gave him, or by the role that was assigned to him. Instead, he defined success on his own terms. For the first time, Jason was leading because he wanted to, not because he had to. He wasn't chasing promotions or trying to impress anyone. He was simply doing the work that he loved in a way that felt authentic and true to himself. One of the turning points in this journey came when Rachel approached him about a new opportunity within the company. A new leadership role that involved managing a cross-functional team focused on developing a groundbreaking product for a major client. It was a challenging role, but it came with a high level of responsibility and visibility. For a moment, Jason hesitated. The memories of the promotion debacle were still fresh in his mind, but he quickly realized something important. This wasn't about seeking approval. This was about him choosing the path that was right for him. Jason accepted the role, but with one condition: he wanted the freedom to implement his own leadership style and make decisions based on his principles, not just corporate mandates. Rachel agreed, impressed by Jason's newfound confidence and vision. This new role, while not officially the promotion he had once envisioned, allowed him to take ownership of a major project and prove to himself that he could lead on his own terms. The success of that project marked a significant turning point in Jason's career. The product was delivered ahead of schedule, and the client was ecstatic with the results. More importantly, Jason's team flourished under his leadership. They trusted him, respected him, and saw him not just as a manager, but as a mentor. For Jason, this was the ultimate form of success. It wasn't about a title on paper or the accolades from upper management. It was about seeing his team grow and succeed, knowing that his leadership had played a role in their success. Jason's journey had come full circle. He had taken a painful setback and turned it into an opportunity for growth. The promotion he had once craved didn't define him. What defined him now was the impact he had on others and the self-assurance that came with knowing he was leading with purpose and authenticity. And as he stood before his team at the end of the project, looking at the faces of the people who had believed in him, he realized that this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges, more opportunities, and more growth. But Jason was no longer defined by the setbacks of the past. He had become the leader he had always wanted to be, not because someone handed him a title, but because he had earned it on his own terms. As the months went by, Jason began to see the fruits of his labor. The transformation he had undergone wasn't just a temporary shift. It was a deep and lasting change in how he viewed his career, and more importantly, how he viewed himself. No longer was he bound by the expectations of others or the narrow confines of a corporate ladder. Jason had shed the notion that success was defined by titles or promotions. What mattered now was the impact he made, the relationships he built, and the integrity he maintained. When Jason accepted the leadership role managing the new product team, he understood that it was more than just a job. It was an opportunity to forge his own path, to set a new standard for what leadership could look like. And with this new mindset, he found himself excelling in ways he hadn't anticipated. As he took charge of the cross-functional team, he noticed that his leadership style, one built on empathy, clear communication, and adaptability, resonated deeply with his colleagues. It was a stark contrast to the more traditional top-down leadership he had encountered in the past. But it worked. His team thrived under his guidance, and they began to deliver results that exceeded expectations. Jason's work-life balance also shifted. No longer did he see himself as a mere cog in the wheel, grinding away for the next promotion. He started prioritizing his personal life more, taking weekends off, traveling to recharge, and spending quality time with friends and family. This balance wasn't just beneficial to his well-being, it made him a better leader. He found that he was more focused, more creative, and more energized when he wasn't burnt out. One of the most significant changes in Jason's life came from his decision to take on outside projects. While still at Grove Technologies, he began to offer consulting services to small tech startups that needed guidance. It was a way to share his expertise without the constraints of corporate bureaucracy. The work was fulfilling and rewarding. He was able to help these companies scale and navigate challenges using the same skills that had earned him his promotion. These consulting roles not only gave him a sense of accomplishment, but also opened his eyes to the possibility of branching out on his own one day. His success with Grove Technologies and the consulting projects didn't go unnoticed. Jason began to be seen as a rising star, not just within the company, but in the industry as a whole. He was invited to speak at industry conferences, contributing to panels on leadership innovation and team development. What started as a small personal victory, proving to himself that he could lead, had snowballed into something much bigger. His name was now synonymous with thoughtful, people-focused leadership. Despite all this, Jason knew that his journey was far from over. He had achieved much, but he was still hungry for growth. The consulting side of his career was thriving, and the prospect of turning it into a full-fledged business began to feel more realistic with every passing day. He began exploring what it would take to step away from Grove Technologies and fully dedicate himself to his own company. He didn't want to make any rash decisions, but he couldn't ignore the pull toward entrepreneurship. For the first time, Jason saw a future where he could create a business based on the values he believed in, one that prioritized collaboration, innovation, and work-life balance over traditional corporate goals like profit maximization and rigid hierarchy. As Jason considered the path ahead, he found himself reconnecting with his core motivations. The ambition he once had to climb the corporate ladder had transformed into a desire to build something from the ground up, something that wasn't bound by the limitations of corporate culture. He envisioned a consulting business that would not only help companies grow, but also nurture the people behind them. He wanted to help leaders develop emotional intelligence, build diverse teams, and create environments where employees could thrive without sacrificing their personal lives. This vision was clear in his mind, and he felt ready to pursue it. But before making any drastic changes, Jason knew he needed to prepare. He began networking with other entrepreneurs, learning from their experiences and gathering insights into what it took to run a successful business. He worked with a financial advisor to understand the logistics of starting his own firm while continuing to excel at Grove Technologies. He was no longer the man desperate for approval or promotion. He was a leader with a clear vision, a plan, and the confidence to take the next step when the time was right. At the same time, Jason's relationships at Grove Technologies continued to evolve. He became known not only as a reliable leader, but also as a mentor. His colleagues sought his advice, and his team members looked to him for guidance in both professional and personal matters. Jason's reputation as a leader who cared for his people, who recognized their strengths, and who nurtured their growth, cemented his place as one of the most respected figures in the company. His authenticity and transparency made him a trusted ally, and he was able to build a team that worked well together, supported each other, and produced outstanding results. But even as Grove Technologies continued to grow, Jason knew it was time to shift his focus. He was no longer driven by a desire for corporate success. Instead, he was driven by the desire to create something that had meaning. And for Jason, that meant taking the leap into entrepreneurship. He started sketching out the framework for his consulting business, focusing on the niche areas where he could add the most value: leadership development, employee well-being, and organizational culture transformation. By the time Jason felt ready to take the plunge, his confidence had reached new heights. His career at Grove Technologies had given him the foundation to build something of his own, and the relationships he had cultivated there would help him take the next steps. With a clear plan and a renewed sense of purpose, Jason prepared to leave the company that had been his home for so long. He wasn't walking away in bitterness or disappointment. He was leaving with a sense of fulfillment, knowing that he was now on his own path, one that he had forged, one that was uniquely his own. As Jason looked ahead to the future, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had led him to this point. The setbacks, the challenges, the promotions that had come and gone, all of it had shaped him into the person he was today. He had risen above the obstacles, learned from his mistakes, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more focused than ever. The future was no longer something to fear. It was something to embrace with open arms. And Jason was ready to walk into it with the same determination and passion that had carried him this far.